All right, you hear me now? You hear me now, Cuzzo? I'm good. Let me know. All right, it's probably working right now though. I had the mic on mute for a second. I gotta double check that before I start talking, so I'm gonna have to edit that here in a bit. He probably checked out and then checked back in just to make sure I was good. But thank you though, appreciate that. So right? Nah, definitely, because I would have been talking for like no reason. But I'm gonna be getting into some NFL, man, because there's some breaking news. I know you guys seen that title, right? There's been a lot of coaching changes that's been going down in the NFL, and big news. I'm not even going to wait it out, right? I'm gonna get straight into it, and then later on, I'm gonna be talking some basketball here in a bit. So stay tuned on that, Rose. Yeah, I got basketball coming up, so it's gonna be around probably like 6:30, 7:30 my time. So tune into that. I'm going to be sending the invite or the event, the link here pretty soon. But let's tap into what's going on. Right. So in the NFL, breaking news: Sean Payton is officially the new head coach for the Denver Broncos, right? It just came out today, came out not too long ago. I believe it was probably like just over an hour or within 2 hours ago. Sean Payton, the Broncos, and the Saints worked some things out to get. They worked some things out between the two because obviously Sean Payton was still technically under contract with the Saints, so he didn't have the right. He wouldn't have any right to negotiate with any other team without the Saints being involved. Thank you, Voiga, looking out on that thumbs up. And then also, Rose Gold, thank you, though, for pointing out that sound problem for me, right? So, the Denver Broncos officially signed Sean Payton as their head coach, right? So we've been hearing some things with Sean Payton. We heard a lot of different things, a lot of different teams that he could potentially sign with, right? We've heard Chargers. Chargers was a very big one, but they're sticking with John Staley. And I know there was also Texans going out there, but I'm going to get into that soon because the Texans also hired their new head coach, which I'm going to be talking about here in a bit. But as of right now, I want to stick to Sean Payton being the head coach for the Broncos. And what does this mean for the Denver Broncos? What's going to go on here? So we heard some things, and apparently, right, Sean Payton was a little hesitant for this job, and it wasn't particularly the franchise, right? I don't think he had any particular problem with ownership, or that's what was out there. But the two things that that concerned Sean Payton a lot, if he were to coach this team, was one, would he be able to fix Russell Wilson, and two, can he work around the salary cap issues that revolve around this team, right? So with the Denver Broncos, it's no surprise, it's no secret that Russell Wilson had gotten his contract extension last season, right? And Russell Wilson played like dog shit, played like poo poo, right? Poo poo doo doo. He was probably, if not the worst or one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the league, right? And it's sad to say because Russell Wilson was definitely one of the top tier guys in the league, somebody that's been in the league with experience. And going into this season, myself included, a lot of us thought the Denver Broncos were going to be able to make some waves in this upcoming season, or at least the season that just concluded, right? But with that being said, the Denver Broncos, despite having such a horrible offense, their defense for the most part still played phenomenal throughout the season. I believe they held teams for a better part of the season under 20 points, but but their offense couldn't even put up more than 20 points throughout the season. And a large part of that, was Nathaniel Hackett, who was the head coach for the Denver Broncos, and Russell Wilson's play. He wasn't really playing phenomenal. And, there was a lot of things circulating around Russell Wilson. After he had left the Seahawks, you started to hear former Seahawks teammates speak up against Russell Wilson, which is very odd in and honestly, in a lot of situations, right, you never really hear too many guys really talk about Russell Wilson in the fashion that they did, right? They were pointing him out, saying that, he was kind of like uh, I kind of don't want to say this, but he was kind of like a goody two shoes type of guy. Like he had his own office, right? He's married to Sierra. He always kind of would do things on his own. He was never really the team guy that everybody thought he was, which I found to be somewhat shocking, right? And then obviously there was that big mishap in the Super Bowl against the New England Patriots when he threw that interception, right? But it was Pete Carroll's call. But come on now, I mean, he still threw the ball. I said he could have did a QB boot or some shit like that, and then that probably would have sealed the game, right? So at least when it comes to Sean Payton, right? Like I said before, the Denver Broncos and the Saints had to work something out in order to acquire Sean Payton, and then in order to do that, the Denver Broncos traded away their 2023 first round pick and their 2024 second round pick to the Saints for Sean Payton and a 2024 third rounder, right? So, hey man, I didn't know, you could really be giving up these picks for these coaches now. A lot of people over here giving up picks, man. Especially for a coach. I think the last time we had seen something like this was probably in the NBA with Doc Rivers from the Clippers. Actually, no, I don't think it was from the Clippers. I think it was Doc Rivers from the Celtics to the Clippers, if I'm not mistaken, right? So, but with that being said, what's the expectation for this team? To be honest with you, I do not know. I don't know as of yet. There's still a lot of things that need to fall into place, right? We know the Denver Broncos do not have their first round pick because the Seattle Seahawks have their first round pick. So that in itself is a loss, right? They don't have their first round pick. So they're going into the season with basically the same team that they had. But I think there's a lot to look at here. There's, if you look at this thing at a different angle, I mean, the Broncos necessarily aren't a bad team when it comes to personnel. I think they had some guys at receiver. I think Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, both are good receivers, right? And then they also on Javonte Williams also was a very good physical back from the backfield. Russell, it really just came down to Russell Wilson's play. If he had just played somewhat better, I mean, shit, if he played better, period, right? The Denver Broncos would have been an entirely different team. And then so that's, ultimately why Mahomes is the GOAT. But that's also why Sean Payton is here, right? We've seen Sean Payton's resume. We've seen what he's done. He's coached the New Orleans Saints. We've seen the job that he's done with Drew Brees and how he rekindled his career, right? But for better part of his career, Sean Payton has always been an offensive head coach, right? So to come here, already have a good defense, and to come in here and have your sole job is to fix Russell Wilson. I mean, it's a big task because we already know in the NFL, getting QBs or having a QB that consistently plays at a high level is extremely difficult to acquire. You only get so many of those guys, right? Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady. Those guys, they're not leaving teams. They're not going team to team, right? It's a very rare occurrence that you would see QBs bounce from franchise to franchise. But ultimately, Russell Wilson was discontent with the direction the Seahawks were going, and he didn't. He wanted to have some roster insight. He wanted to have a bigger voice when it came to roster changes, and then ultimately it led to him leaving the Seahawks and not being happy there, right? But it seems like he's not any happier than where he is now in Denver. At least when it came to last year, right? He had his teammates pointing him out. You had people calling him out on the sidelines. I'm talking about like blatant. I'm talking about like it was like bold-faced out there. It was borderline disrespectful on how they were getting at Russell Wilson, and honestly, some of it was kind of warranted, though. But with that being said, man, We got to wait for the draft. We got to wait for free agency to kind of have a better look at this. But despite all that, I mean, this is still a tough division. This is still one hell of a division for the Denver Broncos. I mean, hey, you have one team in the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, who's in the who's in the Super Bowl right now. Los Angeles Chargers also made some moves and hired Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator. So we're gonna see what the things that he does with that, right? Because they have a multitude of receivers in that franchise, and also Justin Herbert is a phenomenal QB. They didn't have the greatest year this year, even though they did go to the playoffs, but they had that flop in the wild card round against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So we're gonna see what happens there. And then also we already know what's going on with the Las Vegas Raiders. It's looking like they're gonna be on a QB search as we speak, right? So I say, the Las Vegas Raiders are definitely gonna take a big dump after this season, since they're letting go of Derek Carr, and it's not like the Las Vegas Raiders even have a great defense, right? They have like one of the worst defenses in the league as long as Derek Carr has been QB. So that's my point. I feel like the Raiders defense should take more blame as opposed to Derek Carr's play. I still feel like he's a franchise quarterback. I think it's the wrong decision, but we're not talking about that, man. We're talking about Sean Payton and the Broncos. But going based off last year, I think the Broncos can make a considerable jump. I think they can make. I think this is a big improvement. I think Sean Payton is a huge upgrade from Nathaniel Hackett. Right? Sean Payton comes with pedigree. He comes with a resume. He comes with experience, a certain level of experience that you're not going to find in any other coach. Right? So, bottom line is, man, this was a great hire for the Denver Broncos, but shockingly enough, right? He was actually not their first option, which leads me to my next topic. In Demeco Ryan, the defensive coordinator, or the former defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers, just got hired for the Houston Texans job. So gotta clap it up there for my buddy, man, for the guy, man. Demeco Ryan had a phenomenal year, was a great defensive coordinator, man. He deserves this job without a freaking doubt. So we already know, who Sean Payton is. I already got into that. So let's get into Demeco Ryan, right? Who is Demeco Ryan? So I already stated that Demeco Ryan was the defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers, and they had the number one defense in the league. Right. And then actually I can even bring up some stats here to kind of show you that. So as Demeco Ryan was the defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers, they were the number one team in defense when it came to yards per game. They were second in rush, right? They were tied for first in rushing yards per play. And then when it came to QBR, they were sixth in QBR. They were 10th in sacks. Let me see. What else? No. Is that it? Yes, sir. All right. So they weren't really. And then also they were number one in points allowed per game. All right. So, but there you have it, man. So that was his resume, at least when it comes to last year. So the way the NFL works, obviously, right? With defensive coordinators, offensive coordinators, any coordinator, anybody that does phenomenal job in their respective position as a coordinator, these guys are typically the guys that's getting lined up for the next head coaching hires, right? So and honestly, I gotta clap it up for Demeco Ryan for getting this job, because we already know there's a lot of there's a lot of issues with black coaches getting jobs in the NFL. Honestly, if you want my honest opinion, I wasn't too thrilled about Demeco Ryan signing with the Houston Texans, but I can completely understand why he did in the first place, which leads me to who he is and what he was prior to being a defensive coordinator in the league. So it turns out that Demeco Ryan was actually right? He was actually a player in the NFL, right? So for those that might not know, right? So he recently played for the Houston Texans, which is why he wanted that job in the first place. So I believe that he signed a deal. He signed to be the head coach for the Houston Texans for 6 years, right? So he has a 6 year deal with the Houston Texans. With the Houston Texans, and it's well deserved, right? It's well deserved. He was the number one defense, did his thing. I mean, if you guys were keeping up with the San Francisco 49ers and if you were seeing what these guys were doing, I mean, he had this team set. They looked phenomenal. And honestly, it really just came down to injuries in that last game. And, obviously there were a bunch of other penalties that factored in, but I don't think that game in itself summed up, how the 49ers had played all season, right? If anything, he deserves a lot of credit for how this team was looking because, they were necessarily the motor. The offense, right, was the one, on their end, they were going through numerous changes. They had gotten down to the third string QB and Brock Purdy, right? So the biggest thing with the 49ers that's been consistent all year round is this defense, right? So he played with the Houston Texans from 2006 to 2011. He also played with the Philadelphia Eagles, which is kind of ironic since he lost to them from 2012 to 12-15. And then he became a defensive quality control coach in 2017, became an inside linebackers coach from 2018 to 2020, and then became the defensive coordinator from 2021 to 2022. And then, as we know, from 2023 moving onward, he is going to be the head coach for the Houston Texans, right? So, with the Houston Texans, they have a lot to work on, man. They're probably like one of the worst teams in the league, if I'm not mistaken, but they do have a rushing game. Damian Pierce, I think he played really good. He's one of those, those up and coming running backs. We might see some things from him. The Houston Texans do have some young talent, some guys that we got to look into. I think there was a cornerback that I should point out. I can't remember his name at the top of my head, man. But with that being said, man, with the Houston Texans, a lot of things are up in the air with this team. We know that they had to let go of Deshaun Watson. That was a controversy on its own, right? I'm not going to get into that neither. But right, they do have the second overall pick in the draft, thanks to Levy Smith, who won that last game, right, against the who they beat. Come on now, who did the Houston Texans beat? I don't even remember. I'm sorry about that. Let me know in the comment section who the Texans beat. I think it was the Bears, if I'm not mistaken. I may or may not be wrong. It might have been the Titans. Forget about it. It's not important, right? Right, with the Houston Texans, right? They could either be going. We know that they're going to be going for a quarterback because whoever their quarterback is, I forgot his name, but I know he's not really, he's kind of the rut of the litter. No disrespect, but he's not really the future of this franchise, right? So they're more than likely they're going to be drafting a QB, which is either going to be Bryce Young or the guy from Ohio State, CJ Stroud, right? So it's going to be either of those two. They're going to need a quarterback, and honestly, I think it will be a good move if they pick up, a quarterback, right? And we know that Demeco Ryan, his specialty is certainly defense, so we're definitely going to see some improvements there with him leading the helm at the head coaching position, right? So those are the two biggest hires that happened, and this did happen today. But I do have some other news that I do have to point out also, right? It turns out that the Denver Broncos actually wanted Demeco Ryan as a head coach, right? They actually wanted Demeco Ryan. They preferred Demeco Ryan, right? And I believe I do have that news here somewhere. Let me look for that. Give me a second. Okay, yeah, here it is. Here it is. I'm glad I found it. All right. Ian Rappaport. Thank God, man. All right. So the Broncos in the last few weeks, they zeroed in on Demeco Ryans, secretly tried to lure Jim Harbaugh from Michigan, negotiated a Sean Payton deal, tried to hire Ryans again, and then finalized the hire for Payton as their head coach, right? So there you have it, right? So ultimately, they did want to hire Demeco Ryans as the head coach for this team, but things fell through. And honestly, I can understand why they would prefer Demeco Ryans over Sean Payton. I mean, they had to give up draft picks to get Sean Payton, right? They already don't have their first overall draft pick, and then now you have to give up your next year's first round draft pick and the next year's second round draft pick, right? So I can understand from a business position why you would rather go with Demeco Ryan rather than Sean Payton. But I think in this situation, especially with the Denver Broncos, this was the best situation for the Denver Broncos was to get an offensive coach because, in this league, right? Yes, defensive coordinators do phenomenal jobs, but it's offensive coaches that really do, that really are the hot trend in the league, right? Because typically in the Super Bowl playoffs, you need to have a great quarterback play in order for you to really go far, unless you have a really great all-around team. I think the Eagles are an exception, right? And despite that, Jalen Hurts still played good to very good, in my opinion. Despite the stats, despite how some people may look at him, I think a lot that falls into place with Jalen Hurts comes down to his leadership, his grit, and just being able to make plays happen. Right, this guy scores touchdowns, and that's what's most important, right? So, so the thing about it is here. With these two hires, we're going to see down the line which hire is really the best. But as it pertains to the Denver Broncos, I think this was the better decision to hire Sean Payton. And ultimately, right, we're going to see what goes down. We're going to see what happens in the near future, right? So let's get into some other things here before I get on to the next thing, right? So this obviously needs to be updated, right? This is from the Athletic. The current NFL head coaching openings. We already know that the Broncos are done for. They fired Nathaniel Hackett on December 26th. The Texans also, right, who let go of Levy Smith on January 8th, which was literally like the day after the season. The Panthers, right, they fired Matt Rule, and then they hired Frank Reich, who got fired by the Indianapolis Colts, right? And then also the Cardinals, who fired Cliff Kingsbury. We're going to see what happens there. I think that's the only coaching hiring. I think that's the only coaching. That one and the coach job are the only two jobs that are open as we speak, right? So let's go down. Let's get in a little bit more in depth with this article, right? So Sean Payton still has some juicing left, some coaching juice left, right? So when he left, we know, I think, it was tied with Drew Brees ultimately retiring. And obviously, the Saints were in a very tight salary cap spot. So I think Sean Payton didn't want to deal with that mess, especially trying to find a new quarterback, trying to find your new guy. I think he just wanted to go into a situation where he already had a guy, and then he just wanted to elevate them and establish that offense with his own system, right? So one thing that stood out to the Broncos search group was how Payton finished in New Orleans, right? From 2017 to 2020, Saints were 49-15 and won 4 straight NFC South titles. Those were Drew Brees, age 38, 39, 40, and 41 seasons, right? So those were his ages. And then belief is Payton still has a lot of coaching juice left. I mean, hey, bro, he's not playing. He's coaching. So hell yeah, he has a lot of coaching juice left. Come on now, Bill Belichick has been coaching for years, right? So it's not gonna make Sean Payton any different. But hopefully, man, he can start to turn some things around. I think. With Sean Payton, they're going to go a little bit more West Coast offense, try to establish the short game, definitely run the ball a lot, right? And then, establish a lot of play actions, right? So I do agree, Sean Payton in the latter years of his tenure with the Saints, he did do a really good job with the New Orleans Saints. Unfortunately, they were unable to go to the Super Bowl due to numerous shortcomings in the playoffs, one being that big pass interference call that wasn't called against the Los Angeles Rams, right? I know you guys remember that one, right? So what else? The 49ers. The 49ers will net another third round cop pick. This one in the 2025 draft, with Demeco Ryans leaving to be the head coach of the Texans. San Francisco has already received comp picks in 2023, 2024, with Ryan Carthon hiring to be the Titans GM. So only one pick for Ryan, not two. I'm not really concerned about that, right? Also, Frank Wright, right? Frank Wright is the new head coach for the Panthers. We know what happened with him this year, as he was fired mid-season from the Indianapolis Colts, right? I don't have really much to say about this hiring, though. I mean, I can personally say that, Frank Wright didn't deserve to be fired in the middle of the season. I mean, he did go to the playoffs. He did win his division, right? But they were plagued with injuries. We've seen the situation with Andrew Luck, and he tried to make the project work with Carson Wentz, and that ultimately fell short, right? So I think ultimately he was kind of scapegoated. I think more blame deserves to go to, more so to the quarterback position. But at the end of the day, man, when you're the head coach, you got to assume the responsibility. You take all the blame. You're the guy up front. If it's not the head coach, it's usually the quarterback. And at this point, nobody's going to, everybody knows Carson Wentz is shit at this point. So they're just going to look at Frank Wright because he wanted him. Like, they looked at him like, why'd you want this trash motherfucker? You know what I'm saying? So I think there was just a lot of frustration built up with the Colts, especially since this team did have some level of expectations heading into the season. They did have one of the best offensive lines in the previous 2 years. So things fell short. We're going to see a new tenure with the Panthers. I think it was pretty I think it was I think it was kind of a sleazeball move to not give Steve Wilkes the job. But hey, man, it is what it is, So that being said, Broncos, we already talked about, right? We already talked about that, right? Broncos close to announcing Sean Payton hiring, right? Adds to cart. Demeco Ryan calls Texans my dream job. So Demeco Ryan's statement on becoming the Houston Texans' new head coach. I'd like to first thank the San Francisco 49ers, Kyle Shanahan, and John Lynch for 6 incredible seasons where I grew as a coach and a man. I couldn't be prouder of what we accomplished together, and I will always cherish the relationships I built here. Being the head coach of the Houston Texans is my dream job, and my family is thrilled to be back in H-Town. I've been around the game of football my entire life, and I've always had a natural ability to lead others. I know what it takes to win and be successful in this league as both a player and coach. We're going to build a program filled with players who have a special work ethic and relentless mindset. I understand the responsibility I have to this organization and to the fans of Houston to build a winner, and I can't wait to get to work, right? That's what I'm talking about, man. Get in there, and implement that mindset. Let these guys know, man, hey, I'm here to work, I'm here to win, and I'm here to take it all, baby. Come on, man. Already fired up, right? Already fired up for my boy, man. Come on now. And also, and then, so who's going to, and then, all right, so let's go to this now. Who's going to replace Demeco Ryans as the defensive coordinator, right? So 11 candidates to replace Demeco Ryans as the 49ers defensive coordinator. The move that the 49ers were expecting a year ago has finally occurred. Demeco Ryans is leaving to be a head coach. Ryans, who turned a strong 49ers defense in 2021 into the NFL's top unit in 2022, will take over the Texans, a team that selected him with the first pick in the draft in 2006. His wife also is from the Houston area. The NFL wants to see more minority candidates in top coaching or executive positions, and 2 years ago, it began an incentive program to that effect. As a result, the 49ers will get an additional third-round pick in each of the next 3 drafts after Ryans was hired by Texans and the Titans made Ryan Carthon their new general manager. Ryan's hiring also means Kyle Shanahan must pick a replacement from a group of candidates familiar with the system the 49ers have run since 2017, as well as the so-called Fangio system that many of the San Francisco opponents, including the Eagles, ran in 2022. Right, so let's look at some candidates here. Let's look at some candidates. Let's give it a whirl. I don't got much time, but I'll still put it out there. Vic Fangio, right? It sounds very familiar. The team's fans will remember Fangio's dominant defenses from a decade ago, especially the 2011 version that finished with 23 interceptions and set the NFL record for fewest rushing touchdowns, 3 surrendered in a 16-game regular season. 10 teams used at least a version of Fangio's defense over this season, one of the reasons cited for why scoring was down at the start of the year. There's been some question as to how Fangio would utilize Nick Bosa, since Fangio's edge rushers typically have had stand-up linebackers. Bosa has made it clear he prefers rushing from a three-point stance as a defensive end. Fangio's nickel units in San Francisco, however, looked a lot like 49ers' current defense: 2 defensive ends and 2 defensive tackles, which suggests he wouldn't have to change much as far as the way the 49ers use their defensive front. Now, I'm not going to read all that. I'm just going to get into the names. God damn, man, I gotta learn how to say some of these names, though. God damn. The defensive coordinator for the Broncos. Honestly, that's not a bad pick. Even though I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name, I think he did a phenomenal job. This guy right here, I think he did a phenomenal job as the Broncos defensive coordinator, despite them being so poo-poo doo-doo this year, right? So, but with that being said, let's get to the next one. Chris Harris, the Titans passing game coordinator. The former NFL safety is considered an up-and-coming coach. He served as the Commanders' defensive back coach under Ron Rivera for the past 3 seasons and was recently hired by the Titans to be their passing game coordinator. Harris, 40, began as an assistant defensive backs coach for the Los Angeles Chargers in 2016, but before moving to Washington in 2020, he's been considered for defensive coordinator positions the past 2 years, right? Marquand Manuel, the Jets safety coach. Manuel, 43, served on the same Seahawks defensive coaching staff as former 49ers defensive coordinator Robert Saleh, which means he's similar with the concepts the 49ers have been running since 2017. The one-time NFL safety also is familiar to Kyle Shanahan from their time together in Atlanta in 2015 to 2016, when Shanahan was a Falcons offensive coordinator and Manuel was his secondary coach. He was made the Falcons defensive coordinator for the next 2 seasons. Atlanta finished 9th in yards allowed in 2017, but dropped to 28th the following season. Chris Richard, the Saints defensive back coach. Richard, 43, is another former defensive back turned defensive coordinator with a background in Pete Carroll's defensive system in Seattle. He served as the Seahawks coordinator from 2015 to 2017, with those units finishing number 2, number 5, and number 11 in the league in yards allowed, as most of the Legion of Boom defenders grew older and began to slow down. The Saints secondary that Richard coached in 2022 finished 2nd in the league in passing yards allowed and was amongst the toughest the 49ers faced in 2022. And also, right, we've heard this name before, Brian Flores, right, the guy who was formerly the head coach for the Miami Dolphins, right? So the 49ers finished tied for the league with 20 interceptions during the regular season. The team that tied them, the Steelers, who hired Flores, 41, following his controversial firing as the Dolphins head coach. Flores is part of Bill Belichick's coaching tree, and because of that, prefers 3-4 defenses. That means he'd have to reconcile how to handle Bosa. He also could point out that TJ Watt finished with a 22.5 sacks while lined up as an outside linebacker in the 3-4 defense in 2021. Flores has been credited with helping to turn around a Steelers run defense that went from 32nd in the league in 2021, 146.1 yards allowed per game, to 9th in 2022 to 108.1 yards per game. And then also, right, Steve Wilks, the interim head coach for the Panthers, right? Shanahan has a good perspective on how well Wilks did as a Carolina's interim coach. The 49ers visited the Panthers in week 5, heard the boos rain down from the stands, and then watched as only red-clad 49ers fans remained in the fourth quarter. It was the Panthers' low point. Matt Rule was fired shortly thereafter, and Wilkes took over a 1-4 team. The Panthers even traded their best player, Christian McCaffrey, to San Francisco, yet Wilkes managed a 6-6 record the rest of the way, right? So he remained 5-5, which is obviously not great, right? It's middle of the pack, it's 500, but I mean, hey, it's something, right? I mean, and the Panthers did play somewhat better under him, right? Instead of Matt Rule. Also, Corey Udlin, 49ers secondary coach, passing game specialist. Udlin, like I said, I'm not great with names. 51 is the only 49ers defense assistant aside from Ryans who has experience as a coordinator, having done so for the Lions in 2020. It wasn't a great season for the Detroit defense, which set franchise records for points allowed, 519, and yards allowed, 6,716 in the season. Still, Udlin's secondary has flourished this season, tying for the league lead in interceptions and landing. Talanio Hafanga. Sorry, I knew that was I saw Hafanga and I recognize that. With Pro Bowl and All Pro honors. Additionally, cornerback Javarius Ward was named a Pro Bowl alternative in his first season with the team. Daniel Bullock. Damn, man, he's a lot of freaking names. I think it was 11, right? So Daniel Bullock, 49ers safety coach Bullocks, is another candidate who give the 49ers a measure of continuity. He arrived in San Francisco along with Ryans in 2017, and he has served as Ryans' eyes in the sky in the coach's booth on game days. Bullock, 39, was a second-round pick by the Lions in 2006, the same year the Texans chose Ryan in the second round. It's possible that Ryans also could lure Bullocks to Houston by giving him more responsibility and perhaps a coordinator title, right? And then lastly, Joe Woods, the Browns defensive coordinator. The 49ers would be outing for continuity with Woods, who coached San Francisco's secondary in 2019 before being hired as the Browns defensive coordinator the following season. Cleveland fired Woods after the Browns' 7-win season in 2022. Cleveland finished 14th in yards allowed, but dealt with communication issues and struggled against the run, allowing 135 ground yards per game and giving up 22 touchdowns, right? Whew, man. So I just kind of read a lot. I touched up on a lot of things, at least when it comes to coaching hires, right? So we know, let me go back to this though. So we know that those are the biggest moves thus far when it comes to coaches. I mean, by far, I think the Denver Broncos hiring Sean Payton as the head coach is clearly the biggest move, right? This is clearly the biggest move this offseason thus far. And I think a lot of eyes are going to be on Denver Broncos yet again as they're going to go into the season and now with a Super Bowl winning head coach, right? So we're going to tap in. We're going to see how this works out. Thank you all for tuning in once again to Cash Sports / Cash Media. I will be streaming here later. Going to be talking some NBA here pretty soon, probably in a couple hours or so. I can't really give you a time, but I'm definitely going to be doing that. And with the Lakers and Knicks game, hey, follow my Twitch, Cash Media, man. Follow my Twitch. I'm going to be streaming the game on there, so stay tuned, right? So thank you all for tuning in to Cash Sports / Cash Media. I appreciate you guys tapping in. Like and subscribe. Hit that bell, that notification button, and have a wonderful day, my football fans. Hey, stay tuned, man. I love talking some football, though. So have a good day.